Welcome everybody here in the room and online. The president is feeling a bit under the weather, couldn't make it. She sends her regrets. Uh, and we have actually a couple of items. Our typical fall budget forum that Laura will go through for us, and then followed by an update from Vice President Mills on strategic enrollment, current status, and future look. And then we have some time set aside for Q&A. My colleagues and I will try to field most of the questions. Anything that comes specific for the president, will be sure there are staff here making notes. We'll be sure to pass them on too. And so the first thing I'll ask is Laura to come up for the fall budget forum update.
Good morning, everyone. That's a lot more people than I expected today. I thought you all would have had enough after the town hall. So I really appreciate you coming today and staying engaged with the budget as we talk about planning for 2025. Today, I'm going to go backwards a little bit so that we can all get sort of rooted in what our planning was for the 2024-2025 year. So I'm going to update you on how we finalized this year's budget. So I'm going to start with talking about the state budget and its impact on our budget planning for this year. So as we were planning for the 24-25 budget earlier this year, there was some concern that the state was going to cut the CSU budget for the 24-25 year. But as the state budget was finalized in June, they actually gave us ongoing funds of $240 million increase to the CSU budget. That's what we call the compact funding, which is an agreement with the CSU and the state that they'll give us a 5% increase to our state allocation each year. And we got that funding in the prior year in 23-24, as you can see on this slide. So that was great news. Every other state agency in California in 24-25 took an 8% reduction. So the legislature had decided that in June it was too late for the CSU and the UC to take that reduction because we had already put together our fall schedules. We had already made compensation agreements with our staff and faculty unions. So this gave us a lot more stability for the 24-25 year. But they also put into the budget law that it was their intent to pass that 8% budget reduction on for the CSU and the UC into the 25-26 year. So we talked a bit about that at the town hall, and that is what's built into our planning for 25-26 right now. Back to the current year, though they did give us that base increase of $240 million this year, you'll see at the bottom, they did give us a one-time reduction of $75 million. So we do need to find one-time money to cover that reduction, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we did that later. So this shows how those changes affected our campus specifically. So our prior year revenue budget for our campus budget was $137.7 million. And we got funding for compensation and benefits of about $7.3 million. So the compensation pool increases here are for both 2023-24 and 2024-25 compensation increases. And the reason both years are in here is because the 2023-24 increases happened so late in the year that they didn't make it into the base budget for 23-24. So you all got them in 23-24, but they weren't in the budget for 23-24. So they're in the base budget plan for 24-25 together. We also have benefits increases in 24-25, and that's primarily healthcare increases. We also got funding this year for GI 2025 and student support programs, which is great news. And we got funding increases for operational costs and compliance programs. These are things like the cost of our insurance premiums going up, funding Title IX and NAGPRA programs. We also, on our campus, made some adjustments to our revenue lines. So we were projecting that headcount would go up this year, so we increased our tuition budget. So far, we have not seen that increase to headcount. Our headcount went slightly down. We're mostly flat this year, but the tuition increase is in our budget plan. And in here is also some increases to our cost recovery revenue. We also have a decrease due to an enrollment reallocation from the system. This is a 3% decrease to our enrollment target. So we get funded for our full-time equivalent students, or FTES, and so we get state allocation given to us. And so because we are under-enrolled, this year the Chancellor's Office is decreasing our target by 3% and reducing our allocation by about 2.2 million. Finally, we have a decrease to our state university grant financial aid, or SUG. And this is because for every dollar that a student pays in tuition, 1/3 of it goes to financial aid. And this is managed in a system-wide pool. And every year the system does an analysis of where the most student aid is needed. And this year it was determined we had less student aid compared to other campuses. So they reduced our allocation so that they could give those funds to another campus where there was more student aid needed. So those funds still go to student aid at another campus. So overall, once we made all of those adjustments, our revenue budget increased by $9.7 million, and this year it is $147.4 million. So today we're focusing primarily on what we call the campus budget, and the campus budget is composed primarily of three main funding sources: the state allocation, student tuition and fees, and cost recovery revenue. And this slide shows how much they each are proportionally of the total. So state allocation is about 65% of our total funding. Student tuition and fees is 24%, and cost recovery revenue, which is funds that we collect from our self-support and auxiliary partners for the work that is done by the campus budget on their behalf, is about 12%. So that makes up the $147.4 million of our budget this year. So switching to the expense side of our budget, this slide shows how our expense budget is composed. So 79% of our expense budget is in compensation lines. That's salaries and benefits. About 5% is in financial aid, and the rest is in operating expense. That's about 16%. Our total expense budget this year is $154.8 million. And as I've said in this presentation for the past few years, that number is higher than our revenue budget, which simple math will show you will create a deficit. So we'll talk a bit more later about what that means and how we close that deficit for the 24-25 year. This slide shows our expense budget allocated out to the divisions. So you can see how we allocate this out by division. So this hasn't changed much proportionately compared to last year. University-wide is slightly larger than it was last year because we have a compensation pool, and due to the timing of when we finalized the budget, not all of the bargaining agreements have been finalized. So we're holding a little bit of that compensation pool centrally. As those bargaining agreements are finalized, those funds will get put out into the position lines in the division. So if you compare last year to this year, you'll see that university-wide is a little larger. And you can compare because this is available on our open book portal through our budget website. So academic affairs is about 49% of the budget. Administration and finance is 25%. Student affairs is 6%. Strategic enrollment is 3%. The president's office is about 2.6. University advancement and the Green Music Center are around 2 and 1%. So we've been focusing on the campus budget and we'll continue to focus on the campus budget. But I wanted to show you that we also budget a lot more here on campus. We have a lot more programs. This slide is also a budget that's available in our open book portal. So this is all of the revenue budgets that we budget here on campus. You can see the campus budget, revenue budget there at the top. But we also budget all of our campus-based fees. Those are mandatory fees that we collect from students that support programs like our Associated Students, our campus union, our student health center, and counseling and psychological services. We also have our other fee-based fund sources, such as our residential education and campus housing program and our parking services program. We have a lot of activity going on campus, and the total university budget this year is $233.5 million. So back to that deficit plan that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to walk you through how we developed our campus plan and what affected the deficit this year and how we closed the deficit. And this is important to understand as we go into planning for the 25-26 year. So this is our final campus budgeted revenue and expense for this year. This is our base budget. So that 7.4 million base deficit is an ongoing base deficit that until we either increase revenue or decrease in expense will carry on. So essentially the 7.4 million will be our starting point for planning for the 25-26 year. So this is how we got to the 7.4. For planning for 24-25, our starting point was our 23-24 final base deficit. In 23-24, we had a base deficit and we took reductions. We closed the deficit in 23-24 with one-time money, but our closing base deficit was the 9.3 million. So that was our starting point for planning for 24-25. We made some of those revenue adjustments that I talked about earlier. We increased our tuition revenue budget and we increased our cost allocation revenue budget. I made some other small adjustments to revenue. And then we have that 3% enrollment reallocation that's reducing our state allocation. We also have some increases to cost. We have some unfunded mandatory costs that we have to cover. This is primarily in the utilities budget. We also had some positions that were necessary that we needed to fund in the area of facilities and strategic enrollment management. And then finally, we were not fully funded by the state for our compensation for either 2023-24 or 2024-25. And so the campus had to cover the gap in those costs. And for the 2 years, the total for that was about $3.4 million. And so since we didn't have a funding source for that, covering those costs added to our deficit for the 24-25 year. After adding all of that up, that increased our deficit to $12.4 million. So knowing that we had this $12.4 million deficit to address, campus leadership began making plans to find strategies to reduce the deficit. First, we knew we had the academic affairs reorganization, and $1 million of administrative reductions were identified that could be used to help reduce the deficit. Secondly, an analysis was done of instructional costs, and it was determined that $4 million of instructional expense could be reduced without affecting the current course load or affecting students' progress towards degree. So with those $5 million of reductions, we were able to reduce the deficit down to $7.4 million. And that's the final base deficit that I've been talking about all morning. So that's how we got to the 7.4. So we still needed to balance the budget. So we still have to find one-time money to close that $7.4 million. And we still have that $75 million one-time reduction that the state passed on to us. Our campus share is about $1 million for this year. So we still needed to identify about $8.5 million of one-time money. So we've been doing this for, this is the 5th year now that we've had a deficit. So some of these strategies will look familiar in order to close the deficit, and some of them are new for this year. First, we have been using strategies. So last year, we have been using some of these, such as the savings sweep and holding unallocated funds centrally that you'll see on this list. And we generated more funds than we needed to close last year's deficit. So we had about 1.15 million in excess deficit strategy funds from last year. So we rolled it to this year's budget to use towards this year's deficit. Secondly, we started doing summer stateside last year. And we had the revenue in the 2023-2024 year without any expenses. The expenses will be in the 24-25 fiscal year. So we essentially have 1 year of kind of bonus revenue. So we'll be using that towards this year's deficit as well. We'll also be utilizing our reserves, our Central University reserves, both the operating and the capital reserves, to close this year's deficit. We're also accessing the IDC, or indirect costs reserve. These are funds that the grants area uses as cash flow for pay-as-you-go grants. But since our grants area is not in an auxiliary and is on the campus side, we can use campus funds to support the cash flow. So we're drawing down these funds to help support our deficit this year. And finally, we're continuing to use these strategies that we've been using in the past, sweeping funds for salary savings and any unallocated funds being held centrally towards the deficit. And that has helped us close our deficit for the year, though we still have that base deficit to roll to 25-26. So we are already beginning, as you all know, planning for the 25-26 year, knowing that we have that 7.4 million that I've said 15 times already, deficit to roll to 25-26, with the intent from the state to cut the CSU 8% with the state allocation. The Chancellor's Office has also has a plan to do a second round of enrollment reallocation, just like they did this year. So those things are contributing to our potential $21 million deficit for 25-26. In September, the Board of Trustees submitted their budget requests to the state to get more base support for the CSU for 25-26 and make the case that the CSU doesn't need a budget reduction. We actually need additional support. So they are working hard at advocacy. We do still have we are still spending more than we have revenue. So we do still need to align our revenues with our expenses, whether the 8% reduction is decreased, but we should have a better idea once the governor releases his plan in January. So it's important for the campus to make these budget plans and also support advocacy in Sacramento for the CSU. We probably won't know what the final budget plan is until June, just like we didn't know last year. So it will be it will be important that we plan accordingly throughout the rest of the fiscal year. So I know that's not heartening news, but it does mean that we are working under the best information that we have right now. So I know that it's been several years of budget reductions, and you're all probably tired of hearing me come up here and say deficit over and over again. But I appreciate you coming anyway and getting updated and informed so that you understand the situation and what's going on with the budget. More information is available on our budget website. This presentation will be uploaded later today as well. Our campus budget plan for 24-25 is also available through our open book portal along with other budget reports. And if you have any questions, please email me or my team. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, they're going to do a little switching here so I can show you a video. Good morning. Why they do that? Real quick, let me offer a quick reminder. As Laura talked about the enrollment for this year being mainly flat, and probably many of you remember the presentation that I did early in the semester where I talked about our new students being up and our retention being up, and you're probably saying, well, why did our enrollment stay flat? So of the metrics we look at, we were up about 5% in new students. We were up about 4% in spring to fall retention through a lot of work in student affairs and academic programs. And you may also have noticed we had a very healthy graduation, and our graduation rates went up. And we graduated more students than we brought in or retained. That's why that metric stayed fairly flat. So this year coming in will actually be the first time in about 6 years where the number of students we're bringing in and retaining is going to outpace the number of students we're graduating. So you'll start to see a cumulative effect in the coming year of that work. But just as a reminder of why did we stay flat when we know that those two metrics increased? It's because our third metric increased as well. We had a wonderful graduation and our graduation rates went up. So that's great for everybody except me. All right, so before we start, it's great for everybody. Before we start, I want to show you a quick video and then we'll talk about our enrollment going forward.
Unlock your passion for nurturing young minds with a Bachelor of Arts in Early Childhood Studies at Sonoma State University. Our program equips you with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to make a meaningful impact on children from birth to age 8. The Department of Early Childhood Studies prepares knowledgeable and caring professionals who are committed to contributing to a just society through high quality education and social service for all children and families. Whether you aspire to be a teacher in preschool, elementary, or special education, or envision a career as a child life specialist, therapist, or social worker, our graduates thrive in diverse fields.
So we're a program of associated students, and our mission is to serve student families. We also partner with the Early Childhood Studies Department, and we act as the Child Development Lab School on campus. So students that are taking different courses can come here and do their field placement hours. Many of them often end up wanting to work with us after that experience, or they take what they learn here into their community, into their homes, into their families. So it has a really big impact.
Well, honestly, it's one of the few colleges in California that offers early childhood education. So that was a huge reason why I wanted to come here.
As a young child, I always loved like the teachers, like the roles they play. They were so influential into like what I wanted to become. So it was an awesome community and I just really wanted to be a part of it. And I really care about kids and I want to make sure that they're safe where they're at.
You got great like professional and like hands-on experience, especially with us getting to work and kind of intern directly at the children's school. The program really prepares you to head straight into the workforce, especially if you're interested in working locally with the school districts here.
Join us at Sonoma State University and start your journey toward a fulfilling career in early childhood studies. Your future in shaping young lives begins here.
Yay.
Thank you. And my appreciation to folks in the Children's Center and our students, early childhood development. As you may or may not know, we started a year ago to try to develop a whole series of marketing assets. One of the things that Jeff Keating and I, who we started about the same time last fall, noticed right away was in order to get the word out, in order to really start to market the university and to turn around our enrollment decline, we really needed to get a lot of information out there. And there weren't a lot of assets for us to be able to show to prospective students and their families. Working with a company that many of you now have met, the folks from Mission in LLC, we actually have 42 of those videos. So we're just over half. We had just finished computer science and anthropology. We've got a series more to go, in addition to the larger videos that we're doing for the university writ large, for the programs and services we do, and then smaller, what we call hype videos that'll be available for social media that we're already using. So, yep, there we go. So let's talk about spring for a minute. I'm going to start there. So where we're at right now is ahead of last year. So we have for this coming spring about 910 applications, and you'll see that that's up. Those percentages are pretty big because it's only about 1,000. So I'd love to say, yes, we're 20% up, but it's only about, 910 applications. Spring's not always been our biggest new incoming student area, but we're up in admits, in deposits, and we still have a ways to go. So this Friday, today's Thursday, so tomorrow we will have our first orientation for spring, incoming new spring students. And one of the really nice advantages that we're offering to incoming transfer students, which make up the bulk of who comes in and joins us for spring, is that they'll actually work with advising to fill out their shopping carts in PeopleSoft. And then next week, as we do registration for all of our continuing students, those new students will actually slot in with the ongoing juniors and register with everybody. I don't know how many of you know what enormous advantage that is for incoming students. And we're the only CSU that does that. So this is a very distinctive competence for us, and real kudos to Kelly and her team, Kelly Kessler, and to Sean and his team in the registrar's office, all the folks in advising, departments, associate deans. It takes a lot of people to bring this off. So this is good news. We have a little bit of ways to go yet, as I'll show you in a minute, but we're so far making pretty good progress. What do we need for spring? So I'm trying to make up a little bit of that number that we reduced in the fall from that large graduation. We haven't used spring again as a very active recruitment semester. We are now. And so we're looking at a spring enrollment of somewhere between 5,450 and 5,550. Just as a comparison, last spring we were 5,533. So definitely I'm trying to overshoot that. So that means we need 400 to 500 new students. And you see we're not quite there yet in our deposits, but we have time yet to go. And so we also need our continuation rate, those students that continue with us from fall to spring, to go up. So those are all students. When I talk about a continuation rate, I'm talking about everybody. When I talk about a retention rate, I'm talking about cohorts of students, first-year students to their first to their second term. So our retention rate, our continuation rate, our new student rate all have to go up. You combine those together to be able to get to that number that we need to help out for the budget deficit for this year. And then that cumulative effect that I talked about as we bring in more students for next year so that the enrollment starts to go up after actually about 6 years of years where it went down in the last 3 years before this pretty dramatically. So that's where we're going. That was not me, in case you heard that. So what kind of opportunities do we have still? Well, our application deadline for spring is still a few weeks away. So even though we're starting orientation and we'll continue orienting those students, we are starting early to make sure that we can give students that registration advantage. It's a draw in the transfer community. But we will continue to take applications on into December. We'll continue to process. We have students that want reconsideration or all sorts of things that Natalie's team will be working on well into the spring, a few weeks before the semester starts. We also wanted to say, said that the orientation is this Friday and that they'll be able to register with their students. It is a big advantage, and we're really trying to help the students in the community colleges know that. So we've been reaching out to the community college, going there. I'll take a quick minute to introduce Paul Edwards, who joined us. Paul, stand up real fast. If you're online, you couldn't see Paul, so we'll send a picture of him out or something. As our Senior Director for Strategic Enrollment. And his real job is to work on all of those partnerships. So we've been out at Napa. We're headed next week to Mendocino and College of Marin. We want to make sure that not only all of our partners see us in a very regular presence, but that we then extend that partnership out to Sierra College, to Los Rios, to Diablo Valley, to De Anza. We've got a lot of community colleges that are just outside maybe of driving range for a commuter, but we have a lot of interest in those areas that we can market to. And then also, as many of you might be aware, we have agreements with the Los Angeles Community College District. And so starting to emphasize students who can come all the way up here, utilize our housing, et cetera. So a lot of work to go in to really start to bring transfer students in. To give you a sense, it's probably not a surprise that SRJC is our largest feeder community college and has been for a while. That's 5 semesters worth of students coming in. I was just looking at what are we really bringing in. College of Marin, Napa Valley, Mendocino College, and they're all at right close to or above a 30% yield rate. And really for feeder schools, you want to be above that. So I'd love to bring several of those up a little bit more as we go into next year. And then if we start to expand our reach to areas where we haven't had quite as much transfer, but that if you look at Solano, we were down there just 2 weeks ago, meeting with their new president. We do have lots of opportunity, I think, there. And especially when you really look at the number of apps that we get versus the yield for enrollment, there's opportunity there. We've got to figure out what keeps those students who are already interested in us to apply from then choosing to actually be here. That's part of what we're working on. And then our South Bay area, San Diego County, Los Angeles, those are areas that is that extended range where, again, I think we have opportunity. We have to go work for it. Those are pipelines that used to exist at the university and then went away. We have to rebuild them. So this will give you a little bit, those of you that are more visual, a little bit more of a visual sense. Where do our community college transfers come from? Again, I'm sort of focused on transfer right now. And you'll see that big cluster around us in our region, but also the Bay Area, the spots over by Sacramento, and then the little clusters, lots of little ones that are down in Southern California. Making sure that we're making a consistent presence, that we're available to those, our partners at those schools and to those students, that they know about us and our academic programs, our student service programs are very, very important. So one of the ways we're doing that is we're actually moving away from an outreach to a recruitment model. What does that mean? I'm going to talk more about this through the year and probably every venue anybody gives me. Outreach is really a way to just be available. The CSU has a very large commitment to regional service That's why there are 23 of us and we all have our own regions. There's actually 5 counties without a CSU, by the way, in the state that we have to service. But it's really about talking about the CSU system and what 4-year opportunities are available. Recruitment is very different. And probably the easiest analogy I can give you is to think about athletics. When coaches identify student athletes that they want to recruit in, there's an awful lot of relationship building. They have a lot of communication. They get to know each other. And then they make mutual decisions about who's going to come in and be on the team. That's actually very much a private school model, right? That's been happening forever. It's not typically a public school model. It's not been the CSU model. The CSU model's been an outreach model, sort of an if you build it, they will come model. And for a long time, that served the CSU well, and it doesn't anymore. Maybe some of the larger campuses it does, but many of us that are smaller, we're going to have to change. We have to build a relationship model. That's what it means to move to recruitment. Our fall apps right now are a little bit behind last year. What I've told my team is we have to pull a Noah Lyle. Anybody know what I mean there? Anybody watch that 100-meter dash in the Olympics in Paris? He hesitated out of the blocks and still won the race. Many of you probably have heard the analogy where you're fixing the car as you're driving down the road or fixing the plane as you're flying it. We are doing that. And so that put us a little bit behind as we started the fall application period, but we're going to rev those motors and catch back up. So while our admits are at about 2289, our deposits are 46, we did offer over double the number of students early admissions at preview day this year, last month. That was a really fun event. But we have a lot of work to do, and most of the fall applications will actually come in about the next 4 weeks. And every year, some of you may not know this, during the Thanksgiving weekend, enough students apply that it almost always brings down the servers for the system. We plan for it, and it happens anyway. So there's tremendous activity as students are home, as they're thinking about next year, as they have the time to do this application work. And it takes time to fill out Cal State Apply, let me tell you. So that recruitment model will get us in the door. But for the enrollment to go up, we have to focus on converting those students and yielding their enrollment. That's also an area where we haven't done as much. I'm just going to be honest, as a university. We got some of that started with Karen and Elias right before I got here. We've got to really rev that activity up. And that happens more at the end of the semester and through the summer. So some of you remember how far up we were all the way through. And then, you know, we were only 5% ahead when we got actually to the enrollment at census. We lost to some other schools. We got out recruited in the summer for schools that were doing this much more intentionally. So that activity that has to go up for us. We have to compete more at the end of the funnel, at the end of the cycle, as much as we are at the beginning of the cycle. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how can I help? And there's a lot of ways. Right now, I would say we, in the last 2 years, I'll look at Kelly because this is a generalization, but we've probably tripled the number of visits and people that are coming to the campus for visits, not only classes that a lot of departments and faculty are working with. Our visit program is very popular right now, and you regularly see very large groups of students on the campus. While the program has tripled in size, our staffing for that program has not. And so Kelly and her team, which is basically Kelly and Zach and students, need your help. And the biggest thing that you can do to help is if you're planning with a colleague at another school, a high school, community college, an area organization to bring students here, register it early. So out on our admissions page, soon we will have a welcome center page, but right now it's in admissions. It says experience SSU and then campus tours. If you register that, it's in our system. Plus, you can see what other tours we already have coming that day. It's heartbreaking for Kelly to get a phone call that says, hey, I've got, 150 students. We're coming in from this high school. They're all excited. And we already have 500 students on that day that are coming. And how do we make that work? Somehow she almost always does, but we got to help her. So the minute you know about it, register it. It just takes a minute, and that'll help us plan for how many tour guides we need, what we need to do, all that stuff. Sign up to be a faculty or staff ambassador. We can't expand that team right now, but we can expand that team right now. We do that in partnership. Lots of you are already doing this. We're formalizing a program to help you, to make sure that you have the materials you need, to make sure that if you have questions about how to do recruitment, that we can work on that with you, to make sure that we're, to ask you if you've got a list of those students, please give them to us so that we can enter that into Slate and continue to correspond with those prospective students. That whole program is being run by Denise Bevins. Denise is a graduate student, so she's just part-time, and Kelly. But they want to make sure that we're both acknowledging and supporting the work that many of you are already doing, but also giving the opportunity for those of you that want to help to be able to help. And then the last part for me is active referral. All of those students that come here, all of the students that you're talking with in the community, those are our prospective students. And I really want to know who they are. Not only so that we can send them wonderful videos like that if they're interested in early child development. And remember, we're building those for all of our programs, all of our services. We want to be able to connect with students in what they're interested in, to showcase not only our beautiful campus, but what they can expect when they get here, and soon what they can expect when they graduate, and working with alumni and really building profiles out there with Tiffany and her team that show students, here's what you can do. Our students today want to know that. That's a deciding factor in where they choose to go. So if you're doing that and you're not sure who to contact, you can always let us know at outreach@sonoma.edu. Kelly staff monitors that email all the time. At the end of the day, if you're just not sure what to do, email or call me. You can get a hold of me and I'm happy to help. All right. So with that, I think we have a couple of minutes for some Q&A for either Laura or I. Laura's hoping they're all for me. Monir and Karen are here. Mario, Gerald. I don't know if we have mics that are we do. So Neil's got a mic. There's a question over here. And we'll pass around the mic to whomever gets to answer the question.
Hi, Ed. Thank you. I'm from nursing, Anne Marie.
Yes.
I was talking to an SSU alum over the weekend and also have them in my family. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to the fact that I have college age kids myself. What we can do to help your team to really connect back with our alumni. We have a lot of alumni in nursing, and I know in our department, we're struggling a little bit to really know who they are. And so maybe if you could just speak to what we can all do, because I know college graduates really need that leg in the door. And we're hearing from a lot of young people that they can't get jobs. And so if you could speak to that networking piece, that'd be great.
Sure. And it's a critically important aspect. I'm going to ask Mario to help me out here for a minute, because this is an area that we definitely need to work our way into.
Absolutely. Thank you. We've been active in doing regional events, but also starting to do more here on campus. First and foremost, I'll point out my alumni team, Tiffany O'Neill and her team. You can reach out to them. They're more than happy to work with you and pull together some degree of an alumni reunion for nursing or something. But we have started regional events. We've started local events and trying to bring those individuals back to campus. As Ed mentioned, part of what we're trying to do also is tell the story of what our alumni are doing. in their chosen careers. That's going to help in recruitment as well. We continue to hear students and families say, what's that return on investment? And if we can share the alumni stories, the success stories that are out there, that's what's going to attract students as well. So yes, we want to partner with you. Definitely get in touch with Tiffany. I see her already looking over at you, and she'll definitely reach out to you if before this is all done.
Did you want to say something, Karen? Okay. All right.
Hi,
Yes,
Ed.
hi. Hi.
Mark Gondry, computer science. I had a question. I guess the answer is probably going to be email Mew or email outreach, but we offer common information for some of the most common places transfer students come in our program. And we'd love to have a heads up on sort of what community colleges you're recruiting for, so we can offer that preemptively, even those that have not been places that have been common to people come from, but we'd like to sort of help them plan out to have a successful 2-year transfer path. Is that just as simple as emailing out to be like, hey, where are
Yeah.
y'all recruiting? We want to support them early.
No, actually, I love that idea. That's wonderful. So Paul, who if you're online, you didn't see yet, but Paul, who is there, I'm going to ask him to connect with you. And because, yeah, we have a specific rollout of how we're going to work our way through the community colleges, and I'm happy to involve you in it. Paul's the one working on. Are you going to come up so they can see you? Okay.
Oh, that sounds perfect.
They're
I'll
making him
reach
come
out.
up. So this is Paul Edwards. So Paul is really going to be working with our partnerships, both in community college and K-12, and get a hold of me and Paul. He's on week 4. So but he hit the ground sprinting, and we'll definitely work with you or
Sounds
any
great.
other department that has that interest.
Sounds great. Nice to meet you, Paul. I got not a follow-up, but a second question for Laura about
right.
the budget. You said the prior strategies of sort of holding funds centrally and sweeping funds was used to cover some of the deficit. And it looked like the numbers you showed, it was a really significant way of covering a big portion of the deficit, is that those prior strategies. Those prior strategies seem to me to indicate, if there are that many unused funds that can be swept, that maybe some units have been over allocated. I wonder if the budget will ever have actual expenses at the end of the year to kind of see where those promising adjustments could be made.
Yeah, thank you. So I do believe we have a budget to actuals on our open book portal. We don't. End of year balances. So that does show sort of what we have left over. So that's essentially budget to actuals. It's more of a function of my conservative estimates rather than excess funds. So I don't want to overshoot how much I think we might have in hiring salary savings or things like that, for example. So I would say that's more of a function of why we have leftover deficit salary savings at the end of the year. To answer that particular part of your question, I think your deeper question is, do we have excess funds in our units? I think that's a yes and a no. I mean, there's some areas where we have maybe small sections where we could reallocate resources. I don't think that's a big win anywhere. I think there's probably small pockets where we could move some funds that are underutilized to areas that have more need. But I don't think there's a sweeping amount of money that we are underutilizing. Did I answer your question? Okay. That's my sense from our balances.
Hi, my name's Pam Torliette, and I work in admissions. And first off, I want to thank Ed Mills for the leadership that you've been providing on getting recruitment, yielding students, and putting a real plan in place. I've been really impressed with your communication skills and these types of presentations that you continue to do. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh,
I think this is the kind of leadership that we need at the university. So I'm appreciative of that. I guess my question is, what programs are we bringing forward that are revenue generating for SSU, such as graduate programs? And what impacted majors are we expanding and to increase enrollment? And there's nursing, other impacted areas. And how are we supporting those staff members and expanding faculty, which is going to actually yield additional revenue for the university?
Thank you for that question. I'll help with that one. So as you know, I draw your attention to the May 2024 current new programs task force report, which identifies a set of new programs that we are in the process of considering for development. We are, in a tough place right now because we're cutting, but we also need to grow. And so we're going to have enough revenue to grow those new programs. Some of them, or to expand existing programs. Some of them may not cost much to do, right? And that's great news. In other words, we might be able to do that with existing faculty. In other cases, for example, a master's of social work or a bachelor's of social work, which might draw in a large number of people, we don't currently have a certified faculty member to teach, to coordinate a master's of social work program. We would have to hire that. Right now, there is a hiring freeze. I can't hire any faculty. So I'm just saying that hiring for this year is not on the table. And so the programs that we can really look at sooner rather than later are programs that involve changing our existing programs and altering them in an effort to draw in new students, or really just like departments deciding that they're not going to offer program X, they're going to offer program Y, and changing that mix of academic programs. So this is a process, and it's a process that's hampered by the deficit that we're dealing with for this year. And so it's not an easy problem to fix, but we do know from our Gray decision intelligence data and from the current new programs analysis that there are programs that will draw in new students. And so our task really over the next 6 or 8 months is to figure out how we can do that, how we can expand, for example, nursing. The nursing faculty, kudos to the nursing faculty. They have already expanded. So they are already taking more students. We were able to get them enough faculty that they're already taking new students at all levels. And so that's a terrific place to expand. But nursing is not easy to expand. It's expensive in terms of spaces, and it's difficult in terms of clinical placements. And so we continue to work on that problem. We continue to work with our healthcare partners. We continue to work in all of the healthcare areas. And that's certainly something that we'd like to expand on. And we're hoping to have donor support. and other kinds of support for expanding healthcare. Because we do think that that's an area where we're meeting workforce demand, we're meeting the needs of the community, and we can bring in new students, right? The trifecta. And so the good news is that, and I think I announced this at Senate last week, we are receiving a legislative pass-through kind of grant that Nathan Evans helped us to get, our short-term interim president, because he likes us and he really enjoyed being here and he's trying to help us. We got $2.5 million to expand healthcare programs. That's great news. It doesn't get us a huge way along the way, but it's positive. And so we're hoping to leverage that for additional donations, for additional legislative support, for additional community support, healthcare partner support, so that we can really develop that area. We're going to have to be creative like that with the areas where we want to expand, because we're not going to have oodles and noodles of instructional budget to be able to hire lots and lots of faculty. So expanding faculty is going to be very difficult in the short term. So I just want to be realistic about that.
Thank you. My name is Julie Barnes. I'm the Director of Operations for the School of Science, Technology and Business. That's a fancy word of saying I'm a bean counter. And I intimately know where our money is and how much is left or not left at the end of the year. For this purpose, I think there's a disconnect. It could be my interpretation. So if it is, tell me. I want to make sure it's very clear for the staff. And because I eat, breathe, live this, I'm concerned that something's getting lost in translation. Laura's presentation shows us with a $7.4 million deficit. However, we've been told there's a $21 million deficit. Can you speak to the gap? And if you're not, because of the time now, aren't able to do that, when will you speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, Julie, we're talking about two different fiscal years. So the 24-25 year, we have a $7.4 million budget deficit, and we're projecting for 25-26 a $21 million deficit. So for 24-25, our base deficit is 7.4 million. We've closed it using one-time funds to balance the budget for the year, because we have to close the deficit so that we can pay all of our bills and make payroll. And as we're planning for 25-26, which we've started doing, we're projecting that as we look forward, that we may have up to a $21 million deficit with everything that we know now. Does that help? Thank you.
Maybe one last question.
Wouldn't be a forum without me asking a question. On the subject of clinicals, I'm curious, do we have Sonoma State nursing students at our student health center? And have we looked at expanding that as a way to increase access for students?
We do not right now, John. That's certainly something I can ask questions about. I don't know what the legal issues are. There are some certainly some strict guidelines around that. And so I'll try to find out more about that. Anne Marie may know the answer to that question. Great.
I just want to say thanks to everybody. We're working also on a health sciences program, and I think if the university could really make sure that's being pushed through. And I'll talk to John, because we do have what are called RNs getting their BSN who have to do community clinicals. They can work. I'm actually going to meet with the police chief, because we're trying to find innovative ways for our nursing students from the community college to look at Sonoma County jail, correctional health. So my understanding is we don't have an agreement right now with student health, but I want to do that. So I'm gonna talk to John, and now I've got Karen and everybody else here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. Great to hear that.
Let's see. So thank you all. I just would want you to remind that there on budget website, there is still opportunity to ask questions, even though we are wrapping up the time. So if we didn't get to your question, if you had items that you wanted to hear about and so forth, please feel free to go to the budget side and let us hear what's on your mind, and we'll try to get to them either in one of the forums or even on one-on-one basis if that's needed. So again, thank you for everybody being here and being with us online. Have a good rest of the day.